Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this last meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee of the current administration. My name is Councillor David Beeman and I'm the chairman of this committee. Members and officers, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak. Please keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. Please can I also ask any questions that get brief and to the point. We'll be timing speeches this evening and an alarm will sound when you've been speaking for 4 minutes. Right, let's start. Kim, apologies for absence and substitutes.
We've had no apologies for absence, Chairman, but I've noted that Councillor Dixon is here, so I'm going to make a presumption that she has apologised.
She's not here. But okay. Does the committee approve the minutes of the last meeting held on the 11th of January? I'm putting it on the council's website, that's correct.
Right.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, Kimberly.
We have had a declaration of interest from Councillor Edmonds, if he'd like to explain his declaration.
Councillor Edmonds.
Sorry. Please could I declare the following interest for the meeting, non-pecuniary interest. The declared non-pecuniary interest is that as a result of the disagreement with Waverley Borough Council LPA screening opinion, a Secretary of State screening opinion direction was requested. The proposed Coxbridge development does exceed the 150 dwelling threshold stated in Schedule 2 of the EIA regulations. However, the LPA concluded that the development for 350 dwellings would not create any significant environment effects for Farnham. This was sustained by the Secretary of State following the guidance from the Planning Committee decision, but the Secretary of State's opinion was confirmed not a legal opinion. The attached unsigned LPA opinion date is dated 27th of November 2018. I thought that would have been within the declaration. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Questions from members of the public, Kimberly?
None, Chairman.
Questions from members?
None, Chairman.
Any relevant updates to government guidance or legislation?
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, and we're pleased to be able to confirm that Local Plan Part 2 was adopted at full council last week and now forms a statutory part of the development plan along with Local Plan Part 1. Policies of the 2002 local plan therefore fall away at this point. With regards to tonight's agenda, the adoption of Local Plan Part 2 is anticipated. Local Plan Part 2 policies are appropriately referenced in the report. Please note that the adoption of Part 2 does not alter any of the recommendations that we're putting forward tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Right, now, before we commence, with an introduction, people are probably wondering, this lady on my right hand side, would you like to introduce yourself, Claire?
Yeah, good evening. Just to introduce myself, I'm Claire Upton Brown. I'm the new Joint Executive Head for Planning Development, and I'll be joining you at this committee and committees going forward. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So at least I think everybody else knows everybody else is up here. Right, fine. Right, let's move on to the substantive bits of the agenda, which is the first one has been an application subject to public speaking, which is WA 2022-02046, land at 33 Averley Lane, Farnham, the erection of a one detached dwelling garage following the demolition of the existing garage. Michael Euston, the officer, to present, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everybody. The planning application is a full application for a house in a very large plot in the garden at the rear of number 33 Averley Lane in Farnham. This is the location plan here in front of us, showing the site itself and the site here, where the cursor is, bear with me, where the house is going to be located. Again, this is an aerial view of the site. This is Averley Lane, which is number 33, and the plot's in here.
Sorry. Can't see it unless we're going to vote on it.
Can you see it now, sir? Great, thank you. This is the access drive into the site itself. If you look one way, this is the house itself, and the garage is proposed to be demolished to actually accommodate the road into the back garden. And the other way, it's the route up to Averley Lane itself. Now, the land on the left, this woodland here, is common land, but there's no intention to widen the driveway into the site itself. That will stay as it is for access to the house itself. This is the site looking down from the garden and the outbuildings at Averley Lane, looking onto the site. The site is this basically rectangular piece of land here, sandy based tract of land here. You've got a boundary of trees, including large oak trees on the boundary itself. Basically, it's a raised position with a house. You see houses below us. And this is different views. Again, that's looking to the east with the houses, the plots. This is the plot. This is the site itself. This is the trees on the bank above it. And this is looking east towards more trees. And this one is looking west to the closest house. Now this is looking back. So you've got a substantial bund here that the land drops down. These are existing outbuildings and sheds. This is the existing house at Averley Lane. And again, you have sheds and cabins on stilts at the site itself. So the land drops substantially from the Averley Lane house. So actually building at the bottom of the garden. So it's set down. So this gives you a good idea. This is Averley, this is the existing house, Averley Lane. This is the house itself, the footprint. Now these are mature trees on the boundary. Now we've always been concerned about the proximity of the trees, the root protection areas of those trees, and ensure that the houses themselves, the actual foundations don't affect it. So recommending conditions so that the actual footings don't affect the tree roots. And the siting of the house is away from those trees anyway. Now this is the elevation of the house. It's almost like it's a contemporary house. It's almost like a pavilion style house on 2 stories with a flat sedum roof with a detached garage alongside it. This is a CGI of the front of it. So if you're looking down from 33 Averley Lane, you'd see this. Set down at the bottom of the garden, flat roof. You've got the actual detached house here, looking single story when viewed from Averley House, 33, and the detached garage. Both matching designer materials, both with sedum roofs, both set down within the landscape. And I've got a couple more computer-generated images. This is CGI from the southeast. This is seeing the 2-story element against the boundary with a walkway and steps up to it, the garage here, again set down. And this is the view from the southwest. So quite an innovative development, contemporary design in Farnham. And this, bear with me. This, we had a number of objections from local residents about the actual plot itself. They've gone, the land registry plans show the site itself and where it is, its location. The people actually own the site, own the land where the house is going on. And this proves it. A number of objections in the report showing that. So the main issues, if I can actually get to the main issues. How do you actually go down, Chris? There it is. Cool. Key issues with this, it's within the built-up area boundary of Farnham. There's registered common land at the axis, but they're not affecting that. The impact on the trees and biodiversity, bats and everything. In terms of the trees, it won't affect them because the footings are away from the trees. We're conditioning it accordingly. In terms of biodiversity, we consulted the Wildlife Trust, and they've asked for a further environmental management plan to be submitted as part of the overall scheme itself. In terms of residential amenity, you saw the location plan. The houses are set back more than 20 meters away in compliance with our own residential extensions supplementary planning document. So it's in line with policy, both part 1 and part 2 of the local plan. There's going to be a section 106 for contribution towards a suitable alternative natural green space. That's going to be a final financial contribution to that. And for these reasons set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval, subject to a 106 agreement. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Michael. Right, we have two public speakers on this item. First is Tom Cook. Tom? Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, we've got two Toms here. I've got two Toms, a Tom Cook and a Tom Garsted Bennett. Oh, it's Mark Cook. I do apologise. 1 minute. Mark, you got 4 minutes. Confusion. Mark, if you step up to the speaker, and when you start speaking, you got 4 minutes, my friend.
Hello. Okay, many thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for affording me the time to speak here this evening. I am Mark Cook, not Tom Cook, and I'm an adjacent neighbour to Tom behind me at 33 Averley Lane. And I bring not only my comments tonight and considerations, but also those of the other 20 or so neighbours who have commented on this application. Firstly, I'm struggling to understand how the ecology impact assessment submitted by Darwin Ecology Limited can state that there is no evidence of recent tree felling. The truth is, there has been significant tree fellings since the applicant occupied the property, evidence that is readily available for all to see now. As of this moment, there are 4 tree stumps from mature pine trees that were cut down from 33 Averley Lane and dumped in the adjacent Surrey County Council-owned common land. Additional evidence could be found beneath the earth that has been moved to create the bare level southern ground at the southern point of the plot, if these were to be dug up and inspected. These are not mine nor the residents' opinions, these are facts. I suggest if Darwin or yourselves really want evidence, you go to Google Earth or a similar satellite photograph provider and take a look at the plot of Averley Lane from 4 years ago. No less than 15 large trees have been removed. Only 1 mature tree remains in the entire plot of 33 Averley Lane. In this regard, I would like to ask the committee to consider if they think the £4,200 contribution to the Thames Valley Sang is going to adequately compensate for the thousands of animals affected by the felling of 15 mature trees at this site. Secondly, the case officer has stated in his report, and I quote, there would be approximately 3 metres from the 2-storey rear elevation of the proposed dwelling and the boundary with number 6 White Rose Lane. Approximately, is that good enough? Is the planning officer stating that the minimum distance is 3 metres or the average distance is 3 metres? Is it not the case, in fact, that the closest point to the boundary is only 2 metres? As stated in my comments response, it would be useful to clarify exactly where the property is going to be placed prior to approval, such as the impact on the morning light entering my kitchen and dining rooms. The development of this dwelling has been stated by the applicant as a mechanism to generate the funds required for the redevelopment of their own house, planning application 00101. I remind the councillors that I am not against a new property being built at number 33 Averley Lane. In fact, as I stated in my comments, it represents the best use of what is overall an awkwardly shaped plot. But what I ask is that you consider the sheer size of the house being proposed. It is the absolute maximum it can possibly be and runs edge to edge on the plot, actually crossing tree root protection areas at both ends. I please ask that you refuse this application here this evening and request that the dwelling's overall size is reconsidered and the raised entertainment decking be moved to an alternative location. Finally, that the entire property be moved 2 metres further down the hill. This action would not affect the overall size of the plot, would only reduce the back garden from approximately 380 square metres to 325. In contrast, this action would bring significant reduction in the impact to both the residents of Valley Lane and to myself.
Okay. Thank you very much for your 4 minutes. Right. Tom Gossett Bennett. I think I got that name right. You have 4 minutes, my friend.
Hello.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Garsted Bennett, and together with my wife, Kimberly, we are applying for planning on the site. It is unused garden for us at the moment, which we feel could be put to better use. The plans submitted have been carefully considered to minimise any impact on neighbouring properties, including our own. We welcome any comments and offered site visit to anyone with concerns. Historically speaking, the larger sites such as this are in the surrounding area have already been split up to accommodate more housing. The proposed dwelling is not visible from the road. The site is well screened on all sides with established evergreen hedges, and the design ensures no loss of privacy or loss of light for anyone. We would like to reaffirm our existing verbal commitment to additional screening for any areas of the site that need it following the approval. We would also be happy to accommodate the proposal to benefit any wildlife in the area. We believe that the main reason for so many objections is the widely circulated claim that we are somehow widening the driveway, which would make it, so to make it very clear, we have no plans or needs to widen the driveway. The driveway has been in its current state for decades. We've been somewhat surprised and deeply disappointed by the behaviour of a select few who seem to have taken this false claim to such lengths. And this has caused my family much distress to have been villainised in this way. So we hope the measuring of the plot, which I think is now complete, ridicules of any of this and lays this false claim to rest. We've tried to engage positively to ensure all factors of the proposal meet planning criteria. We're a family who plan to stay on the site for many years to come. We're not developers, which has also been claimed, so we feel the comments have been unfair and unreasonable in some cases. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Tom. Right, who wishes to speak on this item?
Just a question to the planning officer, please, because the proposed dwelling is 18.8 metres wide. How wide is the application with the decking? Because I can't find out how wide this decking is, how big it is, and what the square footage is, square meterage. Because to me, it looks like it's another third the size of the house again.
Michael?
Thank you.
Yeah, my committee report says that quite clearly, councillor. It's not paginated, but it's under the section on design and appearance. It's yeah. Okay. The proposed dwelling would measure 18.8 metres wide by 9.0 metres deep, with a roof height of 6.1 metres. The proposed dwelling garage would measure 6.1 metres wide by 6.0 metres deep. The flat roofs on the dwelling and the double garage would ensure the roofscape of both buildings do not have an overbearing impact on the surrounding area, especially as both buildings will be located at the lowest point of the site.
Sorry, but that is only the building. You haven't got the plus the decking, because actually from looking at it, the garaging goes under the house. It doesn't go under the decking. So how much more is the decking wide, please?
Great. Cool.
Thank you, Chair. And I've just quickly measured that on the plan. So I've got on the overhead here, I've got the floor plan. So you're talking about from this corner here to the outer corner there. So I measure that. Yeah, I think they're both the same. So from the edge here to the edge there. Is that what you're talking? Yeah, okay. I'm measuring that at approximately 24 meters, 23 to 24 meters.
Councillor Hess and Councillor Deere.
Thank you, Chair. When I first looked at this, I was a bit concerned that there was actually overlapping of the tree on the west side I don't know what species that tree is, but judging from trouble with architects' drawings, they're very imprecise, especially when they're this tiny. And I take it that the decking on the west side is supported on posts, which the CGI would suggest. And so by supporting it on posts, there'll be reduced damage to the tree roots because there's certainly an overlap there. So I'd just like a little bit of assurance that that is the case, that by putting posts down to support that part of the decking, the tree roots really will be protected because it looks like quite a substantial mature tree. Also the complaint from, or the objection from numbers 4 and 6 White Rose Lane, that they'd be overlooked. Perhaps the officer could just put our minds at rest about that, because it's obviously a concern to the neighbours. Thank you, Chair.
Michael, you want to respond to that? Another question?
Again, I refer to my committee report under impact on residential amenity. And it sets out there the National Planning Policy Framework and the 12 principles. What about the floor area of where the proposed dwelling will be of ample for the proposed occupancy? And it goes on the nearest residential properties. It's like the adjacent dwellings at numbers 4 and 6 White Rose Lane and number 5 Valley Lane. Concerns have been raised by the neighbouring residents in respect to the impact on privacy and overlooking, specifically from the raised decking. Residents claim the raised decking along the southern and eastern elevations would overlook numbers 4 and 6 White Rose Lane. And noise from people on the decking would affect their quality of life. In practice, substantial screening will be retained along the boundary of the site, which would reduce overlooking and help to minimize noise generated from residents on the raised decking. And also under the tree element, the impact on trees, there's a whole section there in the report as well. Bear with me, everybody. That's there. There are sort of 5, 6 paragraphs there.
Could you help us with the page number?
I don't have a page number on
Oh,
this
okay.
one. Is it on the agenda items? I've got page number here. Okay. There's a whole section there, impact on trees. We go through the policies in the part 1 of the local plan and part 2. The actual trees themselves, T1 and T2. The concerns of the objectors is raised on the 3rd paragraph. The request about the dwelling being moved is in the 4th paragraph. And the 5th paragraph goes on about the submitted tree report. Identifies the extent of the root protection area of 2 mature oak trees, T1 and T2, on the eastern boundary of the site. And it goes on about that and about requiring a further method statement detailing how T1, T2, and T5 root protection areas will not be indirectly impacted on. So the actual posts on the under holding up this walkway are sufficient, but we're saying we want more. We want a further method statement in terms of that, and that's been through our tree officers too, Ian Brewster, and that's where we're proposing the conditions on the tree protection measures to go in. We're asking for the submission of a further arboricultural impact assessment, an arboricultural method statement, and a tree protection plan. The conditions.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Councillor Deere, then Councillor Edmonds, Keane and Coburn. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say I'm a bit puzzled. Why are we doing this? I mean, one single house, we've got 30 people in a room. Maybe someone's called it in, who knows? I couldn't see it in the papers. The density as after this development, if it was permitted, seems to be entirely in accordance with the level of density in surrounding houses. The trees may or may not have disappeared, but unless they're subject to a tree preservation order, I don't think that's actionable. And many of us living here today are only living in our houses because trees have been pulled down. It's part of the process, and if they're not protected, then that's one of the things that happens. The design of this seems to me one of those instances in which we can happily accept a modern elevation, modern appearance, It's not in particularly in the context of other things. It gives us an opportunity to refresh the look of some of the houses in the borough, which I think is a good thing. The matter of ownership, statement of the obvious, nothing to do with planning matter at all. If it's buildable, if it's buildable, if it's not, it's not. And it seems from what our planning officers told us, it is in the ownership. But as I say, that's not a planning consideration, as everyone will be aware. If people are concerned about trees, and as we've been told by the officer, there will be a very detailed scheme of root protection carried out and further analysis as part of the conditions. So I think we can rest easy on that. And as a result of all those factors and the very well, clearly and concisely expressed report given by our officer, I see no reason to object to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. Considering climate change and the new building regulations, what attempt to minimise solar gain is in place? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one question on the trees. I mean, the neighbours seem to be concerned about screening and what have you. Those the oak trees that provide the screening, have they got a TPO order on them? It's all very well saying you'll protect the roots, but if a tree hasn't got a TPO order on it, sometimes that can go awry. Can somebody tell me if they've been TPO'd, please?
Answer that now.
No, sorry, no, they aren't, but they are mature trees. There are 4 oak trees that are mature. They are going to be saved, and basically measures in place to protect them, but they aren't TPO'd. Thank you.
May I come back on that, Chairman?
Yeah, go on.
I do find that quite concerning because we know in the past that trees that aren't TPO'd and you know their roots are supposed to be protected. It's happened in the past that these trees haven't been protected properly and that they have died. So I do have a concern about that. Thank you.
We can actually advise our tree officer to TPO. So,
Yes, Chris.
I think that's probably a separate matter, not for us to be kind of discussing in detail at this meeting. So if there is a concern about whether they should be TPO'd, I think that would be something for outside of this forum. Yeah, thank you.
Is well made, Councillor Keane. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I actually fully understand the concerns of the residents. Anybody who's not, well, anyone who's tried to drive down Aveley Lane, I mean, it is a ridge. There's a couple of ridges coming down the hill, and it is steep beyond belief. And I mean, it's quite difficult to walk down sort of White Rose Lane, Valley Lane, all these roads. You are really on very steep hillsides. And one of the issues with the Bourne is a bowl. You know, you have your ridges going around the whole lot. So there's a lot of reflection and a lot of unintended consequences of new build, especially new build with lots of glass and light. And I can fully understand why the local residents were worried, not about having a house. I don't think the principle of a house, or even, you know, not taking into account the modern style. I mean, this one has tried to come down the hill, but there's no question it's going to stand out because of the topography. You can't do anything about that. You've got a ridge, you've got hills coming down. We saw one picture that the officer showed where you got some idea of the steepness, but I mean, you don't get it from the CGI. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. And this goes right down to the Bourne Stream, you know, and there's a bowl all the way around. And when you have a concert at the bottom, we can all hear it because it sort of bounces off each other's house. So whatever goes on this site, you have to get it right. And I can understand why residents in nearby houses, I mean, the houses just sort of on Aveley Lane here are traditional twee cottages with little picket fences. You know, we've got a range of housing along here. And as I say, it is a very narrow pavement-less, light-less road. It's typical of the Bourne. So, you know, I think it is important that we get it right. And I think that's really all the neighbours are saying. I agree some of the postings have been a bit unnecessarily vitriolic, but you know, it's just really such a sensitive site, and as much as whatever they build down there, you know, the lighting is going to affect everybody. I mean, it just can't help it. And that's why, as I say, design has been so important. And all around it, the, you know, as you say, you can just sort of see the tops of the houses. So, you know, I can understand residents, and I can also, I instinctively don't like things which go side to side on any side. I never have. I'm not sure it's not slightly overdeveloping this particular site, but I'll make my judgment when I've heard others. Thank you.
Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, like others, I've read through the documents, and I must admit, from looking at the pictures you've shown tonight, I'm of the view personally that it is a new type of dwelling. However, they have tried to fit it into that slope. And to me, from looking at those pictures, it does seem to fit quite well. And I don't understand that it will stand out a huge amount. If we're talking about a traditional build with chimneys and all the rest of it on the top, then I can understand the skyline being altered in a dramatic way. But I cannot see this actually dramatically altering the skyline, because most of it will be under the ridge. And of course, you've got trees on the ridge as well. My other point though is I would like to ask the officers, because I do get concerned about this. Southern Water state that it's not within their area, and yet Thames Water make no comment. Now, if Thames Water are making no comment, does that mean they can't supply water?
You want to answer that one? And also the next standing question from Councillor Edmonds as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take Councillor Edmonds' outstanding question first, if that's okay. And apologies, I don't have a lot of information about solar gain in front of me at the moment. So what is noticeable is that the kind of the rear of the property, which is the larger area, is south facing. But in terms of building regulations, they would be required to meet high standards in terms of their construction. So I haven't got a lot of information on that, but the other part is that they would need to meet certain other sustainable criteria. For instance, the condition on 110 litres of water and the electric vehicle charging points would be required via conditions. So apologies, I know that's not a full answer in terms of solar gain, but I don't have all of that information in front of me. And the no comment is not an objection from Thames Water. I think it's simply the case that they haven't commented in this instance. Thank you.
Councillor Neil, I believe, wants to speak. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have much to add on this one, other than to say that I support the application, bearing in mind the various things that have been raised. I think it's interesting to have a modern design like this in that location, and it seems to take advantage of the topography sensibly, so it doesn't have an overbearing impact on the area. So I'll be supporting the application. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can, Councillor Edmonds, did you wish to come back or not?
Sorry, Chair, just wanted an answer to my solar mitigation question. I also have the point that there's excessive light pollution from this building, which does deeply concern me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, any other councillor wish to speak? Right. Well, we'll move to recommendation then, aren't we? Recommendation is that subject to the applicant entering into an appropriate Section 106 agreement, securing a financial contribution towards the provision of suitable alternative natural green space, SANG, within the 5 kilometre buffer of the Thames Basin Heath Spa, and to facilitate any works required in respect of the access across land classified as common land, and that the necessary statutory processes as per the Commons Act 2006 have been sought and secured prior to the commencement of the development, and subject to the conditions listed below, permission be granted. And in addition to that, also we could look at the tree protection, yes, as a separate item.
Tree protection.
Yeah, okay. Condition, yes. Right.
Tree protection is a condition.
A condition, okay, fine.
Different matter.
Okay, okay, fine. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Against? Abstain? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. That's 11 in favour, 1 against and 1 abstention. Therefore, the application is approved.
Thank you very much. Right, thank you. Now move on to the other item for tonight's agenda, and which is not subject to public speaking, and that is WA 2019-0770, land north of Coxridge Farm, West Street, Farnham. The application being referred back to the Western Planning Committee as the completion of the Section 106 agreement has gone past the 6 months that was originally agreed by the council as the period in which it should be completed by from the resolution to grant at Western Planning Committee in May 21. Officers are seeking to extend the resolution to grant until 29th of June 23. Ruth to present. Yes?
Chairman, do you mind if I raise a point of order or a question of my membership of the committee? Obviously, I didn't know that I might be needed to substitute because apologies weren't given. I have registered to speak on this item. I'd like to know whether I'm acting as a member of the committee who cannot vote, or as a member a member attending. But I'd also like to know, if you don't mind, the item 5 on the agenda was questions from members. I did submit a question last week. Item 5 says submission of questions are submitted by Tuesday 21st of March 2023. My question was submitted. Was it covered? Because it doesn't appear to have been from what I've seen on the webcast. And if so, can we do item 5 as it's quite relevant? Are you aware of it? Thanks.
Right, let's do these one at a time. Questions from members. Kimberly, did you see Simon?
No, Chairman, I'm not aware of a question. Where was it submitted to, and what was the question, Councillor Hyman?
Thanks very much. I mean, I can just go back to my go to my emails, I hope, and find out where it went to. I'll just have to look at the in my sent box. Excuse me. Last week. It said 2 committees.
Okay, Chairman,
22nd, 22nd, was it? So it says questions should be received by Tuesday, 21st of March. It was sent on the 22nd, but that was the right number of days in advance. I don't think the Tuesday 21st, because we're on a Wednesday, aren't we now?
That is correct.
So it needed to be sent by the 22nd, I think, according to our constitution. I'm not certain of that, but maybe that's a reason if they got the day wrong. I don't know.
Well, I don't know either. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, if you have a question, I don't think we can answer it now, can we? So, moving on. The other, that's what I was going to say. The other point is that since you're not substituting for a member because there are no apologies received in time. In any case, you're remote anyway, so you can't vote anyway.
I do appreciate that I can't vote. It's just a matter of whether I'm attending as someone, but I'm happy to accept that. May we do item 5 on the question, so I can put the question. It's not a long question.
I don't think it's fair to ask the officers to respond in that short period of time. I mean, we can take it to the next meeting.
It is pertinent to this, and that's why it was put into this meeting. And I don't think it's a difficult one to answer. I don't know, but and it was questioned. The question is actually addressed to you, to the chairman, rather than to the officers.
Well, perhaps it would help if I had got a copy. No, I don't think we can answer it, I'm afraid. Well, you tell me your question now. Is it short? If it is short, is it? Oh, we got it now.
I'll read this out verbatim. Numerous councillors bemoan an apparent ability to influence the time taken by developers to carry out developments following approval. One cause of delay is the increasingly serious practice of delaying completion of Section 106 agreements, gaining developers up to 2 additional years, in addition to the national 3-year constraint and reserve matters allowed. Full stop. There is currently no provision within the Constitution whereby extensions to the time limit set by councillors can be overturned by formal or informal agreements. So to do so would be ultra vires, that's out with the powers. Does the chairman accept that to allow members' decisions to be overturned without bringing the decision back to committee prior to expiry will encourage the delay in build-out of developments and should not be supported? So that is the question, Mr. Chairman. Does that last paragraph?
Right. Okay. Right, okay. Oh, Claire wants to speak. Oh.
Sorry, I think just to begin with, the councillor speaking, this is a planning committee and it can't be a hybrid meeting. So on a technical procedural point, can we just be clear how this is happening? Because
we have
obviously
a
that's
councillor speaking on Zoom before.
okay. Okay, so I think in terms of the question, I mean, it's quite a detailed question, but I mean, I think that the crux of the question is, are developers using 106s to extend their planning permissions? I think is what he's trying, the councillor is trying to get at. And obviously it's good practice, as you've seen as the planning committee, and you'll see in the next item, to put a resolution that has a grant to delegate authority to officers to complete 106s. But if those aren't completed within an agreed time scale, then there's a refusal and the matter returns to committee. So that is the details of the report you're about to consider. And obviously we're not going to discuss those details yet because we're not at that point. We do that for good reason, but there are times, and you'll hear again the details of the particular case that forms your next item, where because of multiple landowners or other matters, Section 106s do take a time to negotiate, and particularly when we're dealing with very, very large complex applications. So if you're dealing with applications maybe for developments of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 dwellings, it's not uncommon for 106s to take 2 years to negotiate. And that's not because the developer is necessarily trying to extend his planning permission. It's because the points of negotiation are so detailed from both sides that the planning authority will continue to negotiate to achieve the right outcome, the right planning outcome for the site. So whilst we note that developers may on occasions take longer to complete 106 agreements, as planning authority, we need to work with developers to ensure the right planning outcome. And if it takes longer than expected, then that is, you know, the nature of the beast. If we think that developers are playing games with us, then obviously we will exercise our rights to either truncate those discussions, bring a application back to committee to resolve the issue, but certainly wouldn't entertain a situation where a developer is just playing games with the council to extend the life of the permission. But obviously most developers are, having spent considerable time and investment submitting planning applications, trying to get a planning permission, not trying to sort of spend long periods of time, not trying to get a planning permission. So I think for now, that's probably the best we can do in terms of responding to this question, taking aside that, you know, it's come slightly from left side tonight at the committee. And I'll be quite happy to take this up separately with you, councillor, outside this meeting, if you want to discuss that in further detail.
Councillor Coburn.
In this particular case, one of the people involved died. Can't possibly put that into legislation and work out how to deal with it. And, you know, when you have a death, sometimes it takes a long time to sort things out. So, you know, can we just get everything in perspective?
Actually, 2 people have died. Actually, yeah, okay. Right. Can I just add that the authority of delegation to the chair and vice chair to extend the time limit on which Section 106 agreements have been signed, as far as I've been aware, been custom and practice for many, many years before this administration. And in fact, we've acted in good faith in all that time, you know, and if there had ever been an occasion when someone had come forward that had been a radical change to the 106 agreement, then we'd have had no hesitation in bringing it back to the committee. You know, just make that quite clear that, you know, we've been acting in good faith. And in fact, by bringing this to committee now, we're trying to, you know, do the right thing. That's all I want to say. Right, okay, right. We're back on track, I think. Ruth.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Just before I start to go through the presentation, I just wanted to draw your attention to the written update sheet. And apologies, it has come to our attention that there was an error in the original report in relation to the affordable housing provision. So in the original report that was considered at the committee in May 2021, it was reported that of the affordable, of the rented affordable provision, that all of that rented affordable provision would be social rented, when in actual fact what had been agreed would that it would be a 50-50 split between social rented and affordable rented. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that before I go into the main body of the presentation. Just before I go any further, also, just to say that a lot of you will remember that this application was discussed by the Western Planning Committee in May 2020-21, and there was a resolution to grant subject to the Section 106 agreement. Now, as you're all aware, having read the report, there are some updates in relation to the scheme that I will cover off in this presentation. What I won't be doing is going through the details of the proposal that have already been considered by the committee under the May 2021 Western Committee resolution, because it would be unreasonable to revisit the entire development again. So just as a reminder for everyone, this is a large greenfield site located on the western edge of Farnham. It is within the settlement boundary, and it is allocated for 350 dwellings in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan and in the Local Plan Part 1. It is also down to contribute 60 dwellings to the council's 5-year housing land supply. So as I've touched upon, there has been an application in on this site that the Western Planning Committee have considered previously on the 18th of May 2021. It's an outline planning application with all matters reserved except for access. And the committee resolved to grant approval subject to a legal agreement that included provisions such as highways requirements and improvement works, 30% affordable housing provision, SPA contributions, SUS place-based and open space management plan, and contributions to waste and recycling containers. So the bulk of the application was considered at that committee. There are some updates that we need to consider now. The first of them being that we need an extension of time to agree the Section 106. And just to allay people's concerns about delays, there have been ongoing and active discussions throughout the entire year and a half in relation to the Section 106 agreement. So it hasn't been something that has been parked by the developer at all in any way. It's just to the complexities of the Section 106 agreement and the fact that 2 landowners have died, as Councillor Cowan has alluded to, that have added to those delays. And we're actually at a point where the draft legal agreement is nearly completed. So officers are requesting an extension of time to enable the Section 106 agreement to be completed, and that extension of time would take us up to the 29th of June 2023. In reality, we're hoping it'll be much quicker than that. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So as part of the discussion surrounding the Section 106 agreement, there were some complexities to do with the fact that Surrey County Council are part owners of the land. So there were some highways improvement works that were supposed to be, that were originally recommended to be form part of the Section 106 agreement. There are technical issues that arise from that because they are landowners of the site, so they cannot sign a legal agreement with themselves effectively. It's now been proposed that those highway improvement works form conditions, and they would be new conditions 23 and 24 added to the conditions that were that formed part of the previous report that was put before you. Officers are satisfied that that doesn't affect the development itself, and it just secures these works in a different way. Moving on from that, during the course of those discussions around the Section 106, the developers said that they would like the option of undertaking the construction of the development in a phased way, and this approach isn't unusual for a development of this scale. In order to enable this to happen, it requires an additional condition, which would be additional condition 22, which would ensure that we have a phasing plan submitted to us for our approval. And then following on from that, it needs amendments to various conditions that you previously considered to enable that phasing to occur. So again, this change doesn't affect the development itself. It's just purely about the timings of when different parts of the development come forward, or when different details in relation to the development come forward. We're also suggesting that one further additional condition, which would be condition 25, which just ensures that details of the market housing mix come forward at the reserve matter stage, because that isn't something that's secured in the Section 106 agreement. And then finally, because we don't have a decision on the application, we do just have to check that it does accord with the local plan part 2. We've obviously already considered at the May 2021 committee whether it can accord with the local plan part 1, and the conclusion was that it does. We've done a check against the policies within local plan part 2, and there isn't a conflict with those policies, but what has happened is that a need has arisen to add a further condition, which would be condition 26, which would satisfy DM 36 of local plan part 2, which relates to self and custom build dwellings. So officers are satisfied that the changes don't materially alter the scheme. I'll just summarise what those changes are quickly, which is an update in relation to the affordable housing position, an overall addition of 5 conditions, 2 highways conditions that would have been in the Section 106, a phasing plan condition, a market housing mix condition, and a custom and self-build condition. Those conditions, the list of the new conditions with the additional conditions and those amended as a result of the phasing is set out in the report. And officers are essentially requesting that we give an extra time in order to complete the legal agreement and approve the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ruth. Right, well, Councillor Hammond has registered to speak, so Councillor Hammond, you've got 4 minutes when you start speaking.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Yes, this was approved by the committee almost 2 years ago on the 18th of May 2021, subject to a 6-month time limit. And when I saw this in January, when, as you know, there was a land next to Old Exchange application to do with South East Water, I found that this was still pending, getting on for 2 years after it had been approved, and I wondered why. And then I was told that it had been extended by the chairman and the vice chairman. And looking into that, I found, and it was confirmed to you, that this was ultra vires, that there was no authority under the delegated powers. I think you were told it in terms of that the Constitution is silent. That I think confirms that that there is no a provision under the scheme of delegation, and therefore this is ultra vires. And the difficulty we've got is that, of course, you've told that to confirmed that to members of the public. And so the public are aware. So this is a big issue in terms of PERDA or pre-election issues, where we really shouldn't be doing things which are controversial because we can't issue press statements or explain ourselves on them. Or certainly the council can't. The problem here is that the recommendation in front of you is in effect asking members to support a cover-up of the unlawful time extension, the failure to issue a notice of refusal, which should have been done 18 months ago, and the failure to publicise and consult on the changes that are now being proposed, which is variation of conditions and phasing. Now, phasing has been added. You know, in trying to incorporate a time extension in a Section 73 variation of conditions and phasing into this original application, we are doing no public consultation whatsoever, no notification to the public of this, and no consultation. Now, a phasing of development can be a significant issue and it requires scrutiny. Unfortunately, the officer report advises that phasing is not a material or significant issue. Now, if that were the case, why would the applicant risk including it? We've been expecting a reserved matters application to come in. Why could they not put in a full application with the changes? I have been advised by another of our planning officers that phasing is normally considered a material consideration. So the issue here, as far as I'm concerned, the big issue in planning terms or process terms, is that there has been no consultation on the changes that are being put in front of you. Nobody out there knows because it hasn't been notified. They haven't been notified. And obviously, with the murky background of the issue of the time extension, which you know is ultra vires, we do need to be extremely careful in what's done. So I would recommend personally that to avoid election PERDA issues, this should be refused on grounds that there has been no consultation on the changes. And invite the applicant to bring forward their long-awaited reserved matters application as a full application with phasing, etc., properly considered. That solves the problem all round, and it doesn't take up any further time. Of course, to agree to this is basically what you're telling all applicants is that they can mess around for two years or more. We don't know how long this will go on for. We've been told for many months that this is expected, Section 106 is expected very soon. We've been told again this evening. I really think we've got to be extremely careful on this because there's a lot of public feeling about this development, and it has to be seen to be done correctly. And obviously, with the no consultation, with the murky background that there is, and the failure to issue a notice of refusal, the right thing should be done. A refusal that should have been issued 18 months ago, because that was our decision. It is wrong to overturn a committee decision, and the decision was had a time limit on there in order to make the developer get on with it. The idea. Well, okay, thanks very much, Chairman. I'll just wrap up. I would say that the deaths, unfortunately, I understand, did happen after the expiry of the time limit, so that can't be to blame. But this item should not be on the agenda. I think to defer would be to fudge the issue and could get us into trouble. So if I were there in person, which I didn't know I could be, then I think to refuse on grounds that there has been no consultation on the changes is the only option.
Got the message right. I think Claire Upton Brown was just.
Yeah. So, members of the committee, just to sort of clear up a few points on this before you start your discussion. We've had reference to a murky background and overturning decisions of the planning committee. Just to be clear what you're being asked to consider this evening, so that you can make an informed decision on this as a planning committee. There has been some confusion in that there was a belief by officers that they could seek an extension of time. from the chair and vice chair during the life of the negotiations on the 106. That was not the case, and that's why we find ourselves today in the situation where we are rightfully bringing this back to you, because we do not have delegated authority to issue a decision. So we are quite simply being transparent and clear. We don't have delegated decision, and therefore we're in front of you this evening to ask for that authority to extend the period to complete the 106. In terms of where we are with the conditions, so you've got some additional highway conditions. So if I just address that first, the general good practice in planning is to use conditions rather than clauses in 106s for lots of good reasons. And personally, one of the very good reasons for using conditions is it's a lot easier to enforce a condition than do an injunction in a 106. So it's good practice, we should use conditions rather than putting them in 106s. It's transpired during the negotiations on this 106 that we can't secure the highway improvements that we need to make this acceptable development through the 106 because of land ownership issues, and therefore we are dealing with them. We're proposing that they're dealt with by conditions as that's set out in the agenda. In terms of the phasing position, you've got an application for 320 dwellings. You can't build 320 dwellings in one go, and nor can the market sustain sale of 320 dwellings in one go. So you won't find a housing builder anywhere in the country that has a single phase where they're trying to build 320 dwellings all at the same time. So phasing plans are perfectly normal. There's nothing untoward about them, and nothing that would prejudice any other part of the permission. So things like the construction management plan, hours of working, all those other things that we are proposing to include in the 106 or conditions to make sure this is acceptable development. So in terms of is there any harm that the residents should be consulted on? No, there isn't. A phasing plan, you know, is normal practice in applications. There's been a suggestion that this should be refused this evening and a full application should come forward. Well, that wouldn't be a reason to refuse planning permission this evening. You've got an outline application, you know, and whilst there have been historic moves to get rid of outline applications because they maybe have some challenges with them at times, the planning legislation still enables outline applications to be submitted, and there would be no reason to say that a developer now has to invest considerable monies with no certainty of outcome because he has no outline permission at the moment to then create a full application. So there's no planning reason that I could advise you this evening for saying refuse an outline and insist that it's a full. So members, I think that is probably as much as I need to say to you at the moment, but I hope that advice helps you to position what we're asking of you this evening in the right way and the correct way to enable your debate and decisions this evening. Thank you.
I'm correct in saying the phasing would be subject to the reserve matters application anyway, wouldn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely correct. And actually, even in the absence of phasing plan, an applicant could choose to create their own phasing by doing multiple approval of reserve matters.
But again, I would just like to emphasise that by long established custom and practice, it has been long allowed that the chair and vice chair should allow extensions where there are no material changes. Anyway, councillors, just anyone debate? Oh, wow. Councillor Hunt, Councillor Hess and Councillor Edmund.
Thank you, Chair. You've already talked about it. I'm just confused about why exactly the 106 went past the period that it had. Can you concisely explain exactly why it did? And should an extension to June, which I think is here, be granted, is that actually long enough? Or would it be more prudent to extend it further? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the discussions on the Section 106, it has been a longer process, I think, than anybody expected. And that has really arisen out of a number of factors. One of them being that Surrey County Council are part owners of the site. So that added layers of complications in terms of how you deal with the highways improvement works and other highways provisions. There was discussion between the council and the applicant about the affordable housing clauses, and that took a while. And we're talking about, I'm talking about sort of points of detail here, rather than the overall affordable housing provision. Then there are 7 parties that need to sign it. So all those parties, every time there's an amendment to the Section 106, all those parties then need to agree that, and that can cause really significant delays. We've already heard there's been at least 5 months delay, I would say, probably because of 2 landowners dying. So this was all actually, we were all very actively discussing the Section 106 agreement, and it was continually sort of being amended to address people's concerns. But for an awfully long time, probably for about a year, and then the fact that the first landowner died put it on pause, and then the second landowner died. So I'd say probably for about 5 months, it has had to be parked whilst that has all been sorted out. And actually now I've been advised that that probate has now been sorted out. And since that time, the applicants have been incredibly keen to get this Section 106 agreement completed and a decision issued. So for all those reasons, there have been some significant delays, but we are at a point where the Section 106 agreement is pretty much completed. There's a time extension on the application for a month, and I'm optimistic that the application the Section 106 could be completed, signed, and the decision issued within a month. But we've asked for 3 months, so that, you know, as kind of a just in case scenario. And so that I think the thinking was that if we ask for a month, and what happens if it goes, you know, 2 days over a month or something like that, we don't want to be back here asking you to extend it for a further month. So I think it was concluded that that would be sufficient time whilst not extending it too far, because obviously everybody wants a resolution to it.
This looks about 20,000.
Yeah, thank you. But if it ran out after 6 months and that was granted on the 18th of May 2021, why are we only discussing it now?
Well, I believe it can. I mean, I can recall from memory we've extended at least twice, haven't we? And one of those was because of the complications of the agreement before a person died.
Yes, thank you. So I think I think it's already been covered that officers, that our practice previously as officers has been, we've been of the view that when there is a recommendation for a Section 106 agreement to be concluded in a certain period of time that's been agreed by committee, that if that needs to be extended, then we can get the agreement from the chair and the vice chair to extend that. The latest advice is that it wouldn't necessarily be lawful for officers to then determine this application without having come back to committee to get committee's agreement to extend the resolution to grant. So that has only come to light recently. So since we started discussions on the Section 106 agreement, we've been working on the basis that if we need to extend it, we can get an agreement from the chair and the vice chair. And it's probably only within the last month that actually the advice is that that wouldn't necessarily be a lawful approach, and that this should be coming back to committee for them to extend the time period for completion of the Section 106.
I would add that this is not an unusual practice, actually, is it, Ruth? There's been many other applications where this has happened, except generally they concluded within the second phase of any extension.
Mr. Chairman,
Barry,
yeah, it seems to me, looking at this draft, it's virtually complete as an agreed draft, and that the death of parties, potential parties to the draft, the landowners, probate would have had to be obtained for their estates, for their executors to instruct lawyers. That would have caused delay inevitably, which I think accounts for much of the delay.
Yes, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to express my appreciation for all the hard work put in by Ruth on this. And what I'm going to say is not directed at officers. When the application for outline consent for the Coxbridge Farm development came before this committee in 2021, I still had a modicum of belief in the planning system. I believed that supporting the largest allocated development in the Farnham neighbourhood plan for 320 houses would count towards the Tory government's imposed housing quota. My vote in favour of the development was despite asking for a meeting with Thames Water with us, the elected ward councillors, being refused. The purpose of that meeting would have been to find out what the implications are of upgrading the sewer to cater for 160 houses at Coxbridge Farm the existing sewer can't cope with. Bear in mind, we had no inkling at the time that South East Water would announce late last year their plans to close West Street for approximately 14 weeks to lay a new water main. The opportunity for cooperation by the utility companies was lost, and we still don't know what civil engineering work will be needed, and West Street could be closed in the months ahead for another 14 weeks. Who knows? For Thames Water to lay a bigger sewer. So the town takes the consequences of this very large development on the chin, with massive inconvenience to the community and financial loss to local businesses. It was approved in good faith that by fulfilling the Farnham neighbourhood plan housing target, we would be protecting our outlying green areas beyond the Farnham built up area boundary from speculative development. But that is not what is happening. What we've got instead is speculative developments being approved on appeal once again. 65 houses at Hawthorns were refused planning permission 2 years ago and went to the planning inspectorate and called into the Secretary of State and correctly refused. 2 years later, the scheme came back again last year and was unanimously refused by this committee. As you know, it went to appeal, an appeal scheduled for a 2-day hearing, but which actually lasted less than 1 day, allowing barely time for representations, and outrageously approved. So much for protection afforded by local or neighbourhood plans. How can anyone have any faith in the Conservatives' Alice in Wonderland planning system we have to work with? This is a clear example of the Conservative government's planning system that's weighted against the interests of local residents to the advantage of developers who contribute so generously to the Conservative Party and who benefit financially from planning approvals. This is a major conflict of interest. In 2019, I was elected as a Farnham residents councillor.
Referring to what this.
I'm just protesting against the planning system, which is so weighted against local communities.
I know, but we're dealing with this planning application, and we have to deal with that planning application on its own. Right.
So,
Edmonds.
are you stopping me there, Chair?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got a number of concerns and preliminary considerations. The first, I understand that we are not dealing with a developer, but a site promoter. That to me is significant. This development was publicly approved and for lawful sustainable dwellings at Coxbridge Farm. The S106 obligations, and I emphasize obligations, are enforceable and the cost can be reclaimed. This is not the case for suggested change to a condition. So I would object to any move from an obligation to a condition. We have in Waverley got a bad record of enforcing conditions. I could not understand why.
Edmonds,
sorry.
I mean, you can't make allegations like that. I mean, anyway, continue.
Thank you. I could not understand why the failure to enter the S106 agreement was not considered planning breach. The Council Code requires that decisions are taken fairly, openly and transparently. The code is designed to safeguard the public's trust in local government. S106 obligations are too critical to delegate to the Chair and Deputy Chair. These significant concerns are reinforced by the Waverley Borough Council Agenda 21st March 2023, page 192 of 738. planning enforcement, of which I have much concern. The council expects that planning permissions will be implemented lawfully, an assumption which I find challenges my rationality, for which I may apologise. Affordable housing should not be indicative, but secured through an enforceable S106 agreement. Increased concern for storm drain overflow, air pollution and water security within a drier climate where the temperatures exceed 40 degrees centigrade demanded that the screening opinion be revised. I cannot support the application to extend.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
Sorry, Chairman, I was way down the line. Right. Well, I don't see what all the fuss is about, to be perfectly honest. This is a strategic site in both the local plan and in the neighbourhood plan, which means it was supported, whether you like it or not, at referendum. You know, we are doing what we have got to do, which is to ratify this 106 arrangement, which Ruth has explained perfectly clearly to us, and explain why the changes that we have to make. And it's come into committee for us to look at it. The public are watching, we're doing it openly and fairly. And, you know, I have absolutely no problem with endorsing the recommendation at all. I really don't see what the issue is. As Claire's pointed out, I mean, phasing is inevitable in 320. It's not even an issue. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I just don't fully understand. I mean, if you'd like a political rant, I'll give you one. But as far as I'm concerned, we're here to look at these planning matters. And I absolutely have no problem in endorsing what the officers have recommended. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to apologise for the some of the comments made by fellow councillors towards the planning system and officers of Waverley. In all the years, I believe that it has been really well done. Everybody has their opinion and we take on board everybody's opinion, but it comes down to policy in the end, and politics has nothing to do with planning in this committee. So I will be supporting the officers on this recommendation. Thank you. And thank you, Chairman, for your support.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, Councillor Spence. Sorry, I forgot to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, if I could, for the planning officers, and I think I know what the answer is, but my concern was that if they're going to phase the project here, that there are going to be affordable houses at each stage of the phase. And so am I correct in understanding that condition 25 is designed to ensure that? And I'd be grateful for some assurances on that. My second question really is picking up on Councillor Hunt's question earlier about why this is coming to the committee. And I was hoping I could get assurance that there are no other applications in a similar position. And if there are, will those be coming to committee as soon as possible? Thank you.
Chris, did I answer the question, Ruth?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So actually there was a connection point on affordable housing that Councillor Edmonds raised, and actually the 106 will secure the affordable housing mix and tenure. It's the market housing mix that it doesn't secure, which is the reason why we're adding condition 25. And then in answer to your query about affordable housing and phasing, that is all contained within the section 106 to ensure that we don't have a whole chunk of affordable housing coming at the end of the scheme, but it has to be delivered during the course of all the phases.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I should be supporting this application. The site is a strategic housing site. There's allocated with 350 dwellings. It is in the local plan part 1 and the Farnham Hood neighbourhood plan, which was voted overwhelmingly by the residents of Farnham. So I shall be supporting this application.
Anybody else? Oh,
Sorry, Chairman, I just really wanted to say something, if I may. I wrote it down when
Why
we were
not?
talking. It was just to do with the boundaries. It's not contentious, don't worry. Because we drew the built-up area boundary of the neighbourhood plan around our site allocations. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because when you go to inquiries, they assume that you haven't allocated any greenfield sites because, of course, we've put the boundary around it. So just for everybody's information, the built-up area boundary of the neighbourhood plan incorporates all the green spaces as well as, well, obviously it goes around the brown spaces that we have incorporated. So if you could spread the word, especially to KCs and others that come into inquiries, because it's very boring explaining it. But that's why on your map, Ruth, there was this wonderful boundary going around this site because it was incorporated at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Wow, what a way to end. Right, we're going to move to the recommendation then. And the recommendation as revised, the amended resolution is as follows. Recommendation A, that subject to the applicant entering into an appropriate legal agreement by the 29th of June 2023, and then we've got unless an alternative date is subsequently agreed by the chair and vice chair of the planning committee, which I hope will not be the case, to secure the provision of 30% affordable housing, 70% rented and 30% shared ownership, contributions towards SANG and SAM, travel plan contribution, 25,000 for highways, improvement works, provision of car club scheme, sustainable travel vouchers to each dwelling, SUDS management and maintenance, open space management and maintenance, provision of LEAP and LAP, contribution towards waste and recycling containers, subject to conditions on informed permission be granted, and the recommendation B, just one, that in the event that the requirements of the recommendation are not met, permission be refused. Those in favour, please raise their hand. Those against? Abstain?
Thank you, Chairman. That is 10 in favour, 1 against and no abstentions. Therefore, it's approved.
Right. Well, what a way to end the last general meeting. Because there's no meeting next week. I hope everybody is aware of that. I suppose it'd be old to say thank you to everybody who served on this. Oh,
Chairman, can I just add my thanks to you as chairman? It has been really helpful with your comments, and I would also like to thank the officers for all their help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, it made it. No. I'd like to thank everybody who has made contributions to this committee. I think it's been very helpful and very useful. And hopefully we reach decisions which I think are just. What I would say is that for those who are not standing, or those who don't make it in elections in May the 4th,